Joe, were you ever tempted as the game progressed Sunday to match Jair on Justin Jefferson?
No. I mean, that's, you have to understand. Now, Jair is definitely worthy of that. I think he's a type of corner that you can do something like that with, and we will. We'll. I'm sure there'll be weeks where we want to do that. Going into the game, with it being the first game of the year, we think that Jair Alexander's, if not he's one of the best corners in the National Football League. But we feel pretty dang good about Eric Stokes and Rasul Douglas as well. So when you do start game planning someone, especially the first game early on in the year, those of course are things that are discussed and thought about. But there's so many moving parts to when you decide to do something like that, because if you decide to match a corner on a specific guy every play, and especially a guy that plays the Z, plays the X, plays in the slot, he fly motions, he changes strengths motions, that's not a real big challenge for the guy that you're asking to do that. But the other 10 people around him, because when you come out of the huddle, you don't know exactly where that wide receiver is going to align, because they do a good job of moving him around formationally, and then obviously within the formation with motions. So with all that being said, that's ultimately why we said, hey, let's go play and do our job. And I think there was about 7 plays last Sunday that I wish we could have had back. I think I just want everyone to understand and know the way we're built from a defense is that we address those things, we learned from them, and we moved on. And the other thing too, I wanted to point out, this was going back to the defense on Monday. I wanted to make sure that there was 61 snaps in that football game, and there was a lot of other good things that we did, and thought the guys played their butt off. A lot of times when you experience a game like that, the first thing you wonder and you hope, you're like, God, did we, was the effort there? Was the physicality there? And it was, and we made sure we pointed that out to the guys. There was just, there were 6 or 7 really bad plays that, if I had a magic wand, we could go back and change. But the big thing is that we learned from it, we moved on, and, we've had 2 great days of practice yesterday and today, and we're on to the Bears.
What would be in the future the barometer for you to match Jair against a receiver? What would you need to see in an opponent for you to believe that that's the best way to go about it?
Well, I think just all the things that I just said. I don't think you can. I mean, Jair can be matched up and go cover anybody in the league. I firmly believe that he's that type of player. But you got to look at the whole thing. You got to look at number one, what's best. What's the best thing for us to play defense as a whole, and what's the best thing for our defense to help us do the number one thing, which is win the football game. So those are all things that are obviously looked at, and that's why we study film and we game plan. But again, we feel pretty good about everybody in that secondary room.
So is there no, this may be no question, is there no football equivalent to the box and one where 10 guys are playing zone and you can cover one guy?
Yeah, and again, I think that's if the best analogy I could give is if there's a great wide receiver on a team and he's always the X receiver, okay? So no matter if there's 2x2 formations, 3x1 formations, if that guy is a static receiver and you know exactly where he's going to be all the time, kind of how football used to be, where guys were a Z, a X, a split end. Well, that's so much simpler just to be able to say, hey, we got a great corner. We're going to have him cover the X all day long. The other 2 guys, you just play football. Well, in today's football, they do such a great job with all the great wideouts. The guy that we had here last year was very, very similar. The guy in LA, and Jefferson is no different. They do such a great job where you have in a 2-by-2 formation, if they're in 11 personnel, sometimes he's the Z, sometimes he's the X, sometimes he's the slot. And then sometimes he's the Z, and on before the ball snapped, he motions to the other side. And there's a million different scenarios I could give you, and that's where it gets difficult for, again, not the guy that you just say, hey, find jersey number whoever and go cover him. It's the other 10 guys on the field that have to get aligned and do their job based off where that guy is. So, to answer the question, is there, every week's different. Every offense is different. Some people are, and every receiver in the league is different. Some guys are truly, hey, they're going to be static in the position that they play. I think offenses have gotten really smart, and they kind of detour defenses from being able to do that by moving guys around and not always knowing exactly where they're going to line up formationally all the time. So it's hard to do. But, especially also if you're in a situation where you're playing a lot of zone coverage, it's much easier to do if you're just say, hey, this week we're going to exclusively play man, I call it dude coverage. Hey, you're going to go cover that dude every snap. Much easier in man, but in zone, that's where the challenges lie.
So that was gonna be my question, Joe. So I know you've played zone a lot over the years. So what's the drawback from your perspective of just playing man? You know what, you're on Thielen, you're on Jefferson, you're on Osborne, and let's just go. What's the drawback to going that route?
I don't think there's a drawback. I think it's just an overall general philosophy of how you play defense first and foremost. And then, basically what you're going to decide to do that game plan that week, We are, if you were to classify us, we're much more of a zone team. But we have many man principles that we can deploy. And it is in the big thing that you guys keep talking about in traveling a specific player to a specific player, it is much easier to do when you're exclusively playing man. Wherein lies the problem is when you're playing zone, especially when they move that player all over the place.
How much of that is dependent on your personnel, maybe even more so than the opponents?
Oh yeah, great question. But I think I'll go back to, that's a luxury that we do have with, not only Ja, but in Stokesy and Sewell. We have 3 guys that I'm not afraid to play man coverage at all. We have 3 corners that can do that. So, that absolutely, big picture when you're deciding to do that, sometimes you might have one corner that can go do that, but your other guys are kind of like, they can't play man. We're in a luxury that we have a secondary that really can, they can play zone, they can play man, whatever we deploy. We just decided to going into that game, we felt really good about all 3 of our corners, not just one of them. And that was our decision. Like I said, we learned from it. Maybe we'll have a different plan the next time we see those guys.
How much of the Bears' offense do you think you did not see because of the monsoon in Chicago?
Yeah, that was insane, man. It's a good question. I think that game it wasn't one of those deals where, we've all been a part of games where, a storm has come in and it's kind of changed the mindset of the game. They were squeegeeing stuff off that thing before the ball was even kicked off. Now, again, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't talked to anybody on either side. I don't know if they were in preparation for that. If they knew the storm was coming, so the game plan was kind of set. But I think with 2 young quarterbacks, especially the type of quarterbacks that both those players are in San Francisco and Chicago, I think it kind of played into because both of them can run. Both of them can create when things break down. And that was the type of game that I really don't know. I'd be lying if I said that if it was a beautiful sunny day, if we would have seen different stuff from the Bears, that's probably the case. But it's hard to say. I have no idea what their mindset was. But I know one thing, Fields is a talented young player. They got a heck of a back in Montgomery. When he's stayed healthy, he's been, you know, one of the top backs in the league as far as ball production. So they, you know, but that specific question, I don't know. I really can't answer.
What's the challenge with a guy like Montgomery who's, you know, a bit like, you know, Green Bay's backs who can run and catch?
Sure. Yeah, you know, I think it's a, you know, there's different types of runners in this league. You know, there's guys that are really good ball carriers when you hand it to them. There's guys that are, you know, more valuable when they get out of the backfield catching the ball. You know, like I said, I think when Montgomery is healthy, he's proven to be able to do both. You know, they do a great job with him in screens. You know, he's a big physical back that, you know, when he catches a routine check down, you know, he can turn it into big yards. So when he's stayed healthy, he's proven to be a very, very good and very productive back.